During the height of World War II, a young man throws himself into the hell of combat without carrying a weapon. Armed only with his faith and a medic's bag, he's mocked by his fellow soldiers and rejected by the system. Yet he's sent to the bloody battlefield of Okinawa. There, while everyone else kills to survive, he survives by saving lives. The rugged, rocky terrain is littered with mutilated bodies. The chaos and brutality of the Battle of Okinawa, as portrayed in Hacksaw Ridge, engulf the scene with thick smoke, violent explosions, and the deafening roar of gunfire and screams. Amid this carnage, a male voice rises in prayer with unwavering faith. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. We then see 4 soldiers carrying one of their own, gravely wounded in the leg. One of them reassures the injured man, Desmond, that they'll get him out of that hell soon. His brother Hal challenges him to a race to the top of a hill. The 2 boys dash through the woods and tall grass, racing with youthful excitement until they reach a rocky ridge and gaze out in awe at the horizon. A couple watching them from afar scolds them, afraid they might fall. Meanwhile, at a cemetery, their father Tom, a war veteran scarred by the invisible wounds of World War I, stands before the graves of his fallen brothers in arms. Trauma has turned him into a bitter, alcoholic man. In a drunken stupor, he shatters the bottle he's drinking from and cuts his hand. Back at home, Tom finds his sons fighting. Instead of intervening, he watches them, even coaching them with the excuse that it's better to punish just one winner than both boys. When the fight ends, he only beats the victor. At that moment, Berta, their mother, calls from the window, begging them to stop. Although Desmond had always been a gentle, quiet child, that day he chooses to defend himself. He picks up a brick and hits Hal, injuring him severely. Tom, horrified by the scene, rushes to Hal, cradles him in his arms and tries to wake him, getting no immediate response. Thankfully, Hal eventually comes to. Still shaken, Desmond watches as Tom removes his belt to punish him. But Berta steps in to stop him. That night, inspired by his mother's unwavering faith and a poster that reads, "To take another man's life is the greatest sin," Desmond makes a silent, unbreakable vow. Later, as the boys try to fall asleep, they hear their parents arguing once again. Hal, still bandaged and hurt, expresses open hatred for his father. Desmond wakes up to find his mother crying alone. With childlike innocence, he asks why their father hates them. Berta gently explains, "He doesn't hate you. He hates himself." 15 years later, Desmond volunteers at his local church. While cleaning a window, he witnesses a street accident and rushes without hesitation to help the victim. He quickly improvises a tourniquet with his own belt. The injured man is rushed to the hospital, where the doctor praises Desmond's quick thinking and clear mind, telling him that his actions likely saved a life. In that moment, Desmond has a powerful revelation. Watching the dedication of the doctors and nurses, he feels a growing, passionate desire to dedicate his life to helping others. It's then that his eyes meet Dorothy's, a nurse whose presence hits him like a thunderbolt. Moved by a mix of curiosity and admiration, Desmond approaches her. Dorothy assumes he's there for a military physical. She's in charge of the blood donation area and, noticing reddish stains on his shirt, questions him with concern. Desmond assures her it's not his blood. Looking for an excuse to keep talking to her, he volunteers to donate blood. During their conversation, Desmond confesses to Dorothy that he's dreamed of saving lives since he was a child, though he regrets never having received the formal education needed to pursue that goal. Moved by his honesty, Dorothy listens with growing interest. The next day, Desmond leaves home with a clear purpose: to win Dorothy's heart and, if destiny allows, ask for her hand in marriage. His mother bids him farewell, wishing him the best of luck, while Hal jokingly tries to smear grease on his clothes while fixing the car. At the hospital, Desmond comes across several soldiers with faces deeply scarred by past burns, reinforcing his calling to serve. He heads to the blood donation area, where, smiling, he invites Dorothy out. That very day, they go on their first date to the movies. Though Desmond nearly ruins the moment by trying to kiss her too soon, their bond not only endures, it begins to blossom tenderly. Dorothy, seeing in him a noble and determined man, chooses to support him by lending him medical books and encouraging him to study on his own. Sometime later, during a family dinner, Hal announces that he has enlisted to fight in World War II, following in their father Tom's footsteps. He shares the news only after making the decision: knowing full well that his family, especially their mother, would disapprove. Berta scolds him harshly, believing that taking a life goes against the values she worked so hard to instill. Tom, upon seeing his son in military uniform, breaks down emotionally. Memories of war resurface and overwhelm him. Deeply shaken, he tells Hal to get out of his sight. Days pass, and Desmond and Dorothy's relationship continues to grow. They enjoy long walks through the woods, one of Desmond's favorite pastimes. On one occasion, at one of his favorite lookout points, the two share a passionate kiss, sealing the love that has been quietly growing between them. After the tragic attack on Pearl Harbor, Desmond decides to enlist as well, but with one fundamental difference. He wants to serve as a combat medic. He explains to Dorothy that he will not carry a weapon and that his sole intention is to save lives, hoping to calm her fears. Unable to hide her worry, Dorothy asks if he plans to propose to her. Deeply moved by her question, Desmond doesn't hesitate and asks her to marry him right then and there. Tearful and smiling, she says yes. Soon after, Desmond visits his father, who is standing at the cemetery in front of the graves of his old war comrades. In an intimate, emotional moment, Tom talks about the men he fought beside, men who are no longer alive. He confesses his fear that he might have to bury his own sons too. Grief-stricken, he voices his doubts about Desmond's ability to endure the horrors of war, especially given the deep convictions that guide his life. Eventually, the day arrives for Desmond to depart for Fort Jackson. After a heartfelt and passionate goodbye kiss, Dorothy gives him a Bible with a photo of her tucked inside, asking him to keep it close to his heart, a symbol of their love and faith. After a long bus ride, Desmond arrives at the fort and is introduced to his new squad mates, including a young man named Smitty. Not long after, Sergeant Howell storms in. His sudden and intense entrance strikes fear into the recruits. Howell is the textbook image of a harsh drill sergeant, loud, intimidating, and hurling insults at random. When he notices a slight smile on Desmond's face, he confronts him with a threatening tone. "Are you laughing at me, boy? Or is that just your face?" Directly challenging his character. Training begins immediately and is as rigorous as expected. Though Desmond struggles with rope knotting, he excels on the obstacle course, outperforming even Smitty, a testament to the agility and endurance he developed in the mountains during childhood. However, the rifle training session becomes a turning point. Desmond categorically refuses to handle a weapon, sparking immediate conflict. Howell decides to take him to Captain Glover so Desmond can explain himself. There, Desmond argues that he should not be forced to carry a gun because he enlisted as a conscientious objector. He also explains that for religious reasons, he cannot work on Saturdays, as it is his sacred day of rest. Captain Glover reacts with disbelief, laughing as though it's a joke. He says he cannot trust a man who won't follow basic orders in battle and requests a psychiatric evaluation to try to have Desmond discharged. Back in training, Howell continues to harass and humiliate Desmond in front of the others. He brands him a coward and a burden, telling the unit they won't be able to count on him when the bullets start flying. That night, as the squad prepares to sleep, Smitty silently approaches Desmond and snatches his Bible, trying to provoke him. When Desmond doesn't react, Smitty slaps him, attempting to start a fight. But Desmond remains calm and peacefully asks for his Bible back, never raising his voice or losing his composure. The next day, Desmond undergoes the psychiatric evaluation. The doctor asks if he hears voices. Desmond answers firmly that he is completely sane. He clarifies that he isn't crazy, just a man of faith. He explains that he's made a vow to God never to take another human life, even during wartime. Later, the doctor informs Captain Glover that Desmond has no mental disorder and therefore cannot be discharged. This means that as long as he completes the rest of his training, he must be allowed to serve, though without carrying a weapon. Furious at the outcome, Glover orders Sergeant Howell to keep Desmond in the barracks and assign him exhausting physical duties like scrubbing latrines and performing heavy labor. Howell also destroys Desmond's bunk in front of everyone and announces there will be no weekend leave, implying that Desmond is to blame for the collective punishment. That night, while sleeping, Desmond is brutally beaten by his own squad mates. When Smitty awakens from the noise and sees Desmond badly injured, he stares in disbelief and asks, "Why do you keep putting up with all this?" The next morning, during inspection, Sergeant Howell notices Desmond's bruised and swollen face. Almost pleading, he advises him to drop out for his own well-being. But Desmond firmly refuses. Not only does he stay on his feet, he also refuses to name those responsible for the beating. With calm conviction, he simply says that he's a heavy sleeper and didn't hear a thing. Once the unit's training is completed, everyone is granted leave to return home. Everyone except Desmond. He is arrested for insubordination after repeatedly refusing to handle a weapon. Meanwhile, Dorothy, waiting anxiously at the altar, begins to worry. Convinced something serious must have happened, she knows in her heart that Desmond would never abandon her without a reason. Locked in his cell, Desmond feels overwhelmed by the weight of the situation and suffers an emotional breakdown. Still, he keeps a composed expression when Captain Glover visits him. Glover tries to persuade Desmond to plead guilty to avoid a trial and secure a quick release. But once again, Desmond refuses, clinging firmly to his principles. Frustrated, Glover turns to Dorothy, hoping she might convince Desmond to put his religious convictions aside, at least long enough to complete rifle training, which wouldn't require him to kill. Despite her desperate pleas, Desmond remains unwavering in his beliefs. Worried, Dorothy turns to Tom and Berta, sharing her fears and frustrations. That same night, alone in his cell, Desmond has a disturbing dream that transports him back to his childhood, to a memory of his parents' heated arguments, with Tom waving a gun. As Desmond tried to intervene, the revolver fired. He awakens suddenly, the memory still vivid and haunting. The next day, Tom shows up at the fort dressed in his old military uniform and adorned with all his medals. With quiet determination, he demands to speak with his former commanding officer, now a general. At the court-martial, Desmond pleads not guilty. He explains that he is willing to serve his country, not as a combatant, but as a medic, dedicated to saving lives rather than taking them. Just as a ruling against Desmond seems inevitable, Tom bursts into the courtroom with a letter signed by the general. The document confirms that the right to be a conscientious objector is fully protected under the U.S. Constitution. Thanks to this crucial evidence, the judge suspends the charges to avoid legal controversy. Desmond is finally granted permission to complete his training as a combat medic. Relieved, Desmond marries Dorothy just as they had planned. Without delay, they enjoy a brief but well-deserved honeymoon. Sometime later, the 77th Infantry Division is deployed to Okinawa, Japan. Upon arrival, the brutal reality of war hits them immediately. They witness soldiers hauling piles of bodies as if they were nothing but discarded objects. The unit settles into the barracks, where they're joined by survivors from the 96th Infantry Division. There, Desmond meets the only two other medics assigned to that combat zone. Veterans from the 96th warn them about the deadly steep plateau known as Hacksaw Ridge. U.S. forces have tried to take it more than 6 times, only to be savagely repelled by Japanese troops each time. They also reveal a chilling detail. Japanese soldiers are known for targeting the wounded with particular cruelty, and medics even more so. They advise Desmond to remove the Red Cross from his uniform to avoid being identified. Just days later, the reinforced unit is sent directly to Hacksaw Ridge. Retaking this strategic position is vital. It could pave the way to regaining control of Okinawa, a decisive step in the final conquest of Japan. Without warning, the battle erupts. The United States Navy launches a rain of missiles, bombarding enemy positions and marking the beginning of the assault. Amid the chaos of explosions and thick smoke, Desmond's unit finally scales the ridge, only to be met with the gruesome sight of the mangled bodies of those who came before them. The clash breaks out with overwhelming ferocity, unleashing a massacre on both sides. Despite the horror surrounding him, Desmond remains true to his convictions. Without hesitation, he begins rescuing his wounded comrades, lowering them one by one from the top of the cliff. Several times, Desmond is nearly discovered and executed by Japanese soldiers, but Smitty intervenes bravely, eliminating the threats and watching his back without a second thought. At the end of an exhausting day of combat, night falls over the ridge. The soldiers dig in, hoping to retake the remaining ground at dawn. At that moment, Desmond expresses his wish to keep searching for survivors on the battlefield. Captain Howell warns him it's too dangerous, but Smitty volunteers to go with him and provide protection, which ultimately convinces Howell to grant permission. During the night mission, Desmond manages to rescue several wounded soldiers before he and Smitty take cover in a trench for a brief rest. For the first time, Smitty shows genuine respect for Desmond, deeply impressed by his courage under fire. Between jokes and confessions, they talk like lifelong friends. Eventually, Desmond falls asleep and is struck by a terrifying nightmare. He and Smitty are ambushed by enemy soldiers who storm their shelter and attack them mercilessly. He wakes up with a start, heart racing. When he shares the dream with Smitty, the latter jokes sarcastically, saying not even in his dreams does Desmond use a weapon. It's then that Desmond reveals the root of his pacifism. Years ago, during a night of domestic violence, he nearly shot his drunken father, who was threatening his mother with a gun. That moment changed his life forever. As dawn breaks, the horror resumes. The Japanese army launches a devastating surprise counterattack, ambushing the American troops. Captain Howell orders an immediate retreat to regroup and call in naval support. In the chaos of withdrawal, Smitty is struck by enemy machine gun fire. Desmond desperately tries to move him to safety, but his efforts are in vain. Smitty dies in his arms. As the rest of the U.S. soldiers descend the ridge, Desmond remains. Hearing the cries of the wounded left behind, he feels deep within that his mission isn't over. He firmly believes it's God's will that he stay and continue helping. Without hesitation, he begins dragging the injured to the cliff's edge and, using an improvised rope system, lowers them one by one to safety, risking his life with each descent. Back at base camp, Captain Glover makes the difficult decision to suspend artillery fire in hopes of saving more lives. However, this pause leaves Desmond, Howell, and the few remaining soldiers at the top of the ridge fully exposed to enemy fire. Even as Japanese soldiers begin executing the wounded, Desmond doesn't stop. He works with superhuman determination. At one point, in extreme danger, he finds a gravely wounded soldier. As he hears enemies approaching, he quickly buries the man partially under dirt and hides beneath another soldier's corpse. The ruse works. The Japanese pass by without noticing him, allowing Desmond to later save the injured man. After securing the man's safety, Desmond returns to the front lines without a second thought. Eventually, he's spotted by the enemy and pursued. In his escape, he finds a tunnel and enters it. There, he discovers the body of a Japanese soldier who had taken his own life. He quickly realizes it's a hidden passage used by Japanese troops to move undetected, which explains their repeated ambushes of the U.S. forces. Tension rises as Desmond dodges enemy soldiers inside the tunnel. In the shadows, he accidentally encounters a wounded Japanese soldier. Despite him being the enemy, Desmond honors his oath as a medic and, following his moral code, administers morphine and bandages the man's wounds to ease his pain. Once it's safe to leave the tunnel, night has fallen again. But the darkness doesn't stop him. He continues moving through the shadows, determined to find and evacuate as many wounded men as possible. Even with his hands bleeding and visibly injured from the effort, Desmond doesn't stop, not until every last soldier has been lowered down from the ridge. At dawn, Captain Glover walks through the camp and is stunned to find the medical tents full of rescued soldiers. He asks how they got there. One of the injured men answers, "It was that guy no one believed in. He brought us all down, by himself." Meanwhile, Desmond finds Captain Howell severely wounded alongside another soldier. First, he carries the comrade to safety, then returns for Howell. At that moment, a Japanese sniper spots them. Aware of the threat, Desmond deliberately exposes himself to draw the sniper's fire. The plan works. Howell, still able to shoot, seizes the opportunity and takes out the sniper. Desmond begins dragging Howell to the cliff. Howell fires at nearby enemies, covering their escape. When they reach the edge, Desmond jumps too, knowing he's done everything in his power to save lives. Just then, Japanese soldiers appear at the top of the ridge, but they're quickly gunned down by Glover and the men stationed at the camp. Desmond's comrades welcome him with admiration and respect, finally recognizing him as a true hero. Back in the camp, he's taken to a medical tent where he learns, with sorrow, that the other medic didn't survive. Later, Glover approaches him privately. He sincerely apologizes for ever doubting him and tells Desmond he's done more for his country than most soldiers ever do in battle. He adds that the unit plans to return to the ridge the next day, a Saturday, and would be honored to have Desmond with them, though he fully respects if he chooses to honor his Sabbath. When Saturday arrives, the unit delays the assault by 10 minutes, waiting patiently for Desmond to finish praying for his comrades. Then, together, they climb the ridge once more to face the enemy. This time, thanks to Desmond's intel about the tunnels, the U.S. troops gain a critical tactical advantage and take the Japanese by surprise. In the heat of the fight, A group of Japanese soldiers emerge from a tunnel waving a white flag, pretending to surrender. But it's a ruse. They hurl grenades at the Americans. The attackers are quickly neutralized, but Desmond is injured while trying to deflect one of the grenades to protect his fellow soldiers. Without hesitation, the men place him on a stretcher and rush him to the ridge's edge. They stop briefly only to return his Bible, which he had lost during the battle. Eventually, the Japanese surrender. Their commanding general, in a final act of honor, commits seppuku. The Americans achieve a decisive victory at Hacksaw Ridge. In that hell of fire and blood, Desmond Doss saved 75 wounded soldiers. His actions earned him the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration for bravery in combat, making him the first conscientious objector in history to receive it. Desmond and Dorothy remained married until her passing in 1991. Faithful to his beliefs, he always credited his actions to the will of God. He lived humbly until the age of 87, passing away in March 2006. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of what real heroism looks like. And now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments, what movie or real-life hero should we cover next? We're listening. Until next time.